Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to day 70 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, third canto. And we are in the 25th chapter of the third canto, sort of somewhere in the middle of the 25th chapter. So let us chant our prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachade Shatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Yes, very good. So we're in chapter 25, which is titled The Glories of Devotional Service. And we're in section 3, which is from verse 12 to verse 27. And we title that Kapila Replies to Devahuti. And we actually we started reading through the chapter, and I mean the section at least from the sections from verse 12 to verse 27. So we read verses 12 and 13. So we start today with verse 14. And the section is titled Kapila Replies to Devahuti. She has placed a number of questions to Lord Kapila. Okay, so on we go now, verse 14. O most pious mother, I shall now explain unto you the ancient yoga system, which I explained formerly to the great sages. It is serviceable and practical in every way. So there's a quite short purport actually, and Prabhupada makes some interesting points. The first point is that even the Lord, does not manufacture a new system of yoga. This is what he's saying here. He's going to explain the ancient yoga system, which he already explained before to the great sages, and it's a very effective process of yoga, system of yoga. On the material level, amongst the people, sometimes it's said that someone has become an avatar and now is expounding some new theological aspect of the absolute truth. But, this is just, hallucination. So, but here we find, Prabhupada says, that although Kapila is the Lord himself in person, and he's capable of manufacturing whatever he likes, really, and he's capable of manufacturing a new doctrine for his mother. But he says here that he's going to explain the ancient system that he's already explained before to the sages. So the thing is, one aspect of it is, when we already have a super excellent process given in Shastra, very authorized, then there's no need to concoct some new system. There's just no need anyway. And particularly there's no need to concoct something which will mislead people. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, At present, it has become a fashion to reject the standard system and present something bogus in the name of a newly invented process of yoga. Okay, so on we go to verse 15. The stage in which the consciousness of the living entity is attracted by the three modes of material nature is called conditional life. That stage of life is called conditional life. But when that same consciousness is attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is situated in the consciousness of liberation. So again, it's a short purport. Prabhupada makes a point. I mean, he's made this point on numerous occasions already, that here we see a distinction between Krishna consciousness and Maya consciousness. Maya consciousness, or Guneshu consciousness, involves attachment to the modes. When you're under the modes, sometimes you work in goodness, then you have knowledge, sometimes you work in passion, then you have many material desires, sometimes you work in ignorance, and you're just very confused and even just ready to give up and just go to sleep. So these qualitative activities, Prabhupada says, qualitative means according to these three qualities, goodness and passion and ignorance. So these qualitative activities, be they in goodness or passion or ignorance, which naturally have in the center material enjoyment, they're the cause of one's conditional life. So that's the Maya consciousness. Now Prabhupada's going to distinguish the Maya consciousness, Guneshu, from Krishna consciousness. Yes, so Prabhupada says, when the same Cheta, or consciousness, is transformed to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, or in other words, when you become Krishna conscious, then you're on the path of liberation. So it's just a whole different thing, a completely different thing. Verse 16, when one is completely cleansed of the impurities of lust and greed produced from the false identification of the body as I and bodily possessions as mine, one's mind becomes purified. In that pure state, he transcends the stage of so-called material happiness and distress. Yes, so this verse is talking about karma and lobha. Karma and lobha in the verse itself. Karma means lust, lobha means greed. Karma, lobha, adabi, and so on. Or beginning with lust and greed, but then, so many other things follow. Right. So, anyway, lust and greed are symptoms of material existence. And here it's stated that lust and greed, desire and greed, are products of false identification with the body. And when you become free from them, then your mind and consciousness become free and attain their original state. Yes, so then Prabhupada says, when we speak of the living entity, this includes the mind and consciousness. And Prabhupada again, anyway, he's talking about the difference between conditional life and liberated life. So he says that the difference occurs when we purify the mind and the consciousness. And when they are purified, then you become transcendental to happiness and distress. Not just distress, but both happiness and distress. So there's a second paragraph also. So in the beginning, Lord Kapila said that the perfect yoga enables you to transcend both material happiness and distress. So how to do that? Well, that's explained here. You have to purify the mind and the consciousness. And this is done through Bhakti Yoga. The senses must be engaged in devotional service. That is the process. That's what you've got to do with the senses. You have to engage them in devotional service. And the mind has to be engaged, not just vacant. The mind must be engaged in thinking of Krishna. So when these two things are there, senses engaged in devotional service, mind engaged in thinking of Krishna, how beautiful is Krishna, how wonderful is Krishna, how he helps his devotees, those are some things you can think of. And then just the philosophy, how Krishna works, what Krishna does, thinking of Krishna. So these two things must be there. Senses engaged in devotional service, mind engaged in thinking of Krishna, not being vacant. And in fact, Prabhupada says you cannot even make the mind vacant. It will think of something, whether you like it or not. So therefore we must positively engage it in thinking of Krishna the person and thinking of serving Krishna, how to serve Krishna, what would Krishna like, how to improve our service. So when we do like that, Prabhupada says, then naturally the consciousness becomes fully purified, and then there's no chance for material desire and greed to enter. This is all crucial information about this yoga practice. All right, so on to verse 17. At that time, the soul can see himself to be transcendental to material existence and always self-effulgent, never fragmented, although very minute in size. So here we have a fairly substantial purport. So Prabhupada begins by saying that when you are in pure consciousness, as discussed in verse 17, that was how to purify. But now when you are purified, your consciousness is purified, then Prabhupada says, then one can see himself as a minute particle, non-different from the Supreme Lord. Actually see oneself. Now, of course, that's a very advanced level, but that comes in due course. So Prabhupada goes on, we, meaning the soul, we are part and parcel of the Lord, as the sun's rays are minute particles of the sun, the power of the sun. So in that way, in the same sort of way, Prabhupada says, the individual soul and the Supreme Lord, or the Supreme Soul, are not separated as in material differentiation. So, in other words, well, we are particles. Prabhupada says the individual soul is a particle from the very beginning. But still, we shouldn't think that because we are particles, then we are fragmented from the whole spirit. No. So the Mayavad philosophy says that the whole spirit is there, but part of it, which is us, the jiva, is trapped by illusion. But this is not acceptable, Prabhupada says here, because the spirit cannot be divided like a fragment of matter. Like we have the piece of paper here, and we can tear a piece off very easily, and then then we've got two pieces of paper. But the jiva is eternally a part of the one Supreme Spirit, as part and parcel. And Prabhupada concludes the first paragraph of the purport by saying, as long as the Supreme Soul, Supreme Spirit exists, his part and parcel also exists. As long as the sun exists, the molecules of the sun's rays also exist. Right, so on to the second paragraph. The jiva is 1/10,000th the size of the tip of a hair. Prabhupada talks about that from time to time. So tiny. If you find the tip of one of your hairs, and then, if you can, then see how you're going to divide just one tip of one hair. This is one hair. How am I going to divide the tip of it into 10,000 pieces? Don't ask me. So anyway, the thing is that it's infinitesimal. The Supreme Spirit is infinite, but the individual soul, that's us, where infinitesimal means extremely small. But between us, the spirit souls and the Supreme Spirit, there is no difference in quality. Yes. So, Prabhupada says that two words in this verse are to be particularly noted. One is nirantaram, which means non-different or of the same quality, and animanam. One is nirantaram, means non-different or of the same quality. And then the second is the individual soul is expressed here as animanam. Animanam means infinitesimal. Yes. So the Supreme Spirit is all-pervading, but the very small, tiny spirit is the individual soul, that's us. And then Prabhupada refers to another word. It's the last word in the verse. Akanditam means not exactly fragmented, but akanditam means not fragmented, actually. But constitutionally always infinitesimal. It's a very interesting way to put it. So in other words, just like no one can separate the molecular parts of the sunshine from the sun, at the same time, the molecular part of the sunshine is not as expansive as the sun itself. Similarly, the living entity by its constitutional position is qualitatively the same as the Supreme Spirit, but He is infinitesimal. We move on to verse 18. In that position of self-realization, by practice of knowledge and renunciation in devotional service, one sees everything in the right perspective. He becomes indifferent to material existence, and the material influence acts less powerfully upon him. So Prabhupada gives particularly this at the beginning here of the purport. It's interesting, very interesting. So Prabhupada says, as the contamination of germs of a particular disease can influence a weaker person, but not a stronger person, so similarly, the influence of the material nature of Maya, the illusory energy, can act on the weaker or the conditioned soul, but not on the liberated soul. So self-realization is the position of the liberated stage. And one can understand one's constitutional position by knowledge, and vairagya means renunciation or like detachment. So Prabhupada makes the point that without knowledge you can't have realization. Therefore the realization that one is just this infinitesimal part of the Supreme Spirit that makes us unattached to material life. And Prabhupada says that is the beginning of devotional service. So, unless or until you're liberated from material contamination, you can't engage in devotional service. Right, so we have to get that realization that we're tiny, infinitesimal parts of the Supreme Spirit, the Supreme Lord, and this will make us unattached to material life. And then you can begin devotional service in meaningful ways. And therefore in the verse it says, Jnana Vairagya Yuktena. When you're in full knowledge, jnana, of your constitutional position, and you're detached from material attraction, vairagya, then you can do pure devotional service, bhakti yuktena, and engage as a loving servant of the Lord. Okay, so then paripashyati appears in the third line of the verse, and it means one sees, you see. So paripashyati, Prabhupada says, means that you can see everything correctly. That's what it means. In its right perspective, for what it really is. That's paripashyati. And when you come to that point, then at that time the influence of Maya is just practically nil. So this is confirmed again. Again, repetition is the mother of remembrance, Prabhupada said. It's confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma, that when you're self-realized, you become happy and free from the influence of Maya, material nature. And then you're freed from lamentation and hankering. And then the result of that is, Prabhupada says, Mad Bhaktim labate param, then you get really situated in the beginning of devotional service. And Prabhupada also refers to Narada Pancharatra, which says that when the senses are purified, then they can be engaged in devotional service. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, one who's attached to material contamination cannot be a devotee. Okay, so now devotees, here we go, on to verse 19. Perfection and self-realization cannot be attained by any kind of yogi unless he engages in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For that is the only auspicious path. That's pretty emphatic, isn't it? That is, let me read it again. Perfection and self-realization cannot be attained by any kind of yogi unless he engages in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For that is the only auspicious path. That's pretty clear. That's really clear, isn't it? So anyway, Prabhupada goes on that from the verse, na yujyamanaya means without being dovetailed or not performing, na yujyamanaya bhaktya, not being engaged in bhakti, or the way Prabhupada puts it here, na yujyamanaya means without being dovetailed in devotional service. So, of course, important point, when there's devotional service, then the next question is, where do you offer that service? Who do you offer it to? Do you offer it to Lord Indra? Do you offer it to some demigod, Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva? Maybe offer it to Lord Shiva. He is very big, very important. But no, you offer it to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the super soul of everyone and everything. Because that's the only reliable path for self-realization or Brahman realization. So again, from the verse, the word Brahma Siddhaye means to understand that you're different from matter. Brahma Siddhaye. To understand that you're Brahman. So Brahma Siddhi then means, well, Aham Brahmasmi, I am spirit. Brahma Siddhi means that one should know that one is not matter. We're different from matter. We are Brahman. So in other words, just in practical terms, Brahma Siddhi means then that we're not the bodies, we're not our bodies, but we are pure spirit soul. So anyway, Prabhupada goes on to explain there are different types of yogis, and every type of yogi is engaged in, or supposed to be engaged, I mean, you never know, but supposed to be engaged in some sort of process of self-realization of some sort, or Brahman realization. But here it's very clearly stated in the verse itself, unless you're fully engaged in devotional service to the Lord, one cannot have easy approach to the path of Brahma Siddhi. So, okay, Prabhupada goes on, we have a second paragraph here. And Prabhupada reminds us in the beginning of the second chapter of Bhagavatam, second chapter, that it's stated there that when you engage yourself in devotional service, knowledge and renunciation automatically come. You know that. What is it? Anyway, there's a verse there. I forget the verse offhand. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayochata Janayatya Suvairagyam Jnanam Chayadahoitakam. When you engage in devotional service to Vasudeva, to Lord Krishna, then renunciation and knowledge automatically manifest. So, okay. So that's from the second chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, in the beginning of the second chapter, actually. So therefore, a devotee doesn't have to try separately for renunciation and knowledge, because they come automatically when you're engaged in devotional service. And Prabhupada makes the point that devotional service itself is so powerful that by one's service attitude, everything is revealed. All knowledge and renunciation, in other words, they're all revealed just by your service. So it's stated here, the verse says, Shiva Panta. Shiva in this context, well, Panta means path, and Shiva does not mean in this context, it doesn't mean Lord Shiva. It doesn't mean you must now do devotional service to Lord Shiva. But Shiva here means auspicious, that this devotional service is the only auspicious path for self-realization. And therefore Brahman realization, or therefore devotional service, is the best way to get Brahman realization. Although this indicates Brahman realization is not Brahma Siddhi, it is not the perfection, because beyond that is the Lord. And we note, if you've read Ishopanishad, if you've done Bhakti Shastri, then we focus on the last few verses of Ishopanishad, very important. And there, the devotee, the speaker of the book, prays to the Lord, please remove your Brahmajyoti effulgence so we can see your form. Yes. So unless we have realization of the form of the Lord, there's no real question of there being bhakti. So, yeah, I mean, this is deep. This is deep. Yeah. Bhakti, Prabhupada says, bhakti necessitates the devotee who does the devotional service, and bhakti necessitates the devotee who does the devotional service. Both have to be there. The devotee and the devotional service, then you've got bhakti. So Brahma Siddhi then, very advanced stage. Well, first of all, the understanding of the Brahma Jyoti is not the perfect stage of Brahma Siddhi. Brahma Siddhi, through devotional service, is realization of the Lord. But the understanding of Brahma Jyoti is not the perfect stage of Brahma Siddhi, because, and even Paramatma, which is higher than understanding the Brahma Jyoti, realization of Paramatma is not perfect. So Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, one who realizes the Supreme Personality realizes the other features namely the Paramatma feature and the Brahman feature, and the total realization on the basis of realizing the Supreme Person. The total realization is Brahma Siddhi. Right. Okay, so on we go to verse 20. Every learned man knows very well that attachment for the material is the greatest entanglement of the spirit soul. But that same attachment, when applied to the self-realized devotees, opens the door of liberation. Here it says in the Sanskrit, Saeva sadhushu krito mokshadwaram apavritam. Mokshadwaram, the door to liberation, is opened by sadhushu krito, having the association of devotees. Right, so Srila Prabhupada explains that it's clearly stated here that attachment, for one thing, is a cause of bondage, but attachment, the same type of phenomenon of being attached, when applied to something else, opens the door to liberation. So in other words, attachment must be there. Prabhupada says attachment cannot be killed. It just has to be transferred. Currently, we, of course, are prone to attachment for material things. That's material consciousness. But attachment for Krishna or for the devotee is Krishna consciousness. So in other words, it's all to do with consciousness. And just in case someone thinks that we should become desireless, Prabhupada makes the point that desirelessness is not possible for the living entity. The living entity, by constitution, has to be attached to something. You can't be attached to nothing. You have to be attached to something. So for the devotee, that means being attached to Krishna, or attachment for the devotees, the spiritual master. So it's got to be something. By constitution, we have to be attached to something. And Prabhupada gives the example that if someone has no children, then they become attached to cats and dogs, things like this. And this indicates that the propensity to become attached cannot be stopped, but it must just be utilized for a better purpose. That's all. So it must be transferred to the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his devotee. So, okay, on to the second paragraph. So here, particularly, it's being recommended that attachment should be transferred to the self-realized devotees, the sadhus. And Prabhupada asks an important question: who is a sadhu? Well, a sadhu is not just an ordinary man with a saffron robe or long beard. A sadhu is described in Bhagavad Gita as someone who is unflinchingly engaged in devotional service. It means, Krishna, yeah. So it reminds me, devotees, let me just tell you about this. I don't know what you'll think of it, but when I was young, I was a great fan of the Beatles, and when they broke up and George Harrison went his own way and produced his record, All Things Must Pass, so there's one song on there It's a really good song. It's called Awaiting for You All. And in it, he sings, by chanting the names of the Lord, you'll be free. The Lord is awaiting on you all to awaken and see. And there's one line, or one verse, and it says, he says, that the Pope owns 51% of General Motors. The stock exchange is the only thing he's qualified to quote us. But by chanting the names of the Lord, you'll be free. The Lord is awaiting for you all to awaken and see. Anyway, when I heard that, I don't know if it's really true that the Pope owns 51% of General Motors, but, he's not really known for being shastric. Yeah. All right, anyway, let's go on. So who is a sadhu? This is the point. So a sadhu is not an ordinary man with a saffron robe or beard. He's someone who's unflinchingly engaged in devotional service. And even if, then Prabhupada refers to Bhagavad Gita chapter 9 verse 30, which is very interesting and important verse, that even if a devotee does something really bad, Prabhupada, the way he puts it here, even though one is found not to be following the strict rules and regulations, but if one simply has unflinching faith in Krishna, then he's a sadhu. This is just straight out of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, verse 30. Sadhur eva samantavya. But anyway, one way or the other, if we want to realize Brahman, or spiritual perfection, we have to transfer our attachment, that propensity to become attached, we have to transfer to a sadhu, to a devotee. And Lord Chaitanya confirms this. Lava matra sadhu sangha sarva siddhi hoy. Simply by a moment's association with a sadhu, one can attain perfection. Yeah, so this is a fairly substantial purport. There's now a third paragraph, and Prabhupada makes the point that the word Mahatma is a synonym for sadhu. Just like you have 6 and you have half a dozen. They're synonyms, synonymous. 2 words with one meaning. So Mahatma is just a synonym for a sadhu. You can use them interchangeably. And Prabhupada says that, referring to this verse here, verse 20, that service to a Mahatma, or elevated devotee of the Lord, is Dwara Mahur Vimukte. It's the royal road of liberation. But, and Prabhupada quotes part of Srimad Bhagavatam 552, Mahatsaivam Dwara Mahur Vimuktes, so serving the Mahatmas, opens the door, Dwaram Vimuktes, opens the door to liberation, but Tamo Dwaram, Yoshitam, Sangi Sangam, Tama, the mode of ignorance, fallen condition, Tamo Dwaram, the door to fall down, Yoshitam, Yoshitam means women actually, Yoshitam Sangi Sangam, if we become materially attached, particularly to women. Yeah. So yeah, then it's the opposite effect. Rendering service to the materialists has the opposite effect. And Prabhupada says that if you offer service to materialists, then you open the door, whereas service to the Mahatmas opens the door to liberation. Service to the materialists opens the door to hell. Wide open. There you go. Nothing to stop you. The door is just open. Yes. So therefore, the attachment to the devotee means attachment to devotional service. Because if you associate with a sadhu, then the result will be, it just will be, that the sadhu will teach you how to be a devotee, how to become a devotee, how to progress in devotional service. And these are the gifts of a sadhu. So therefore, and this is important, devotees, this is important, that if we associate with a sadhu, we cannot expect he'll teach us how to improve our material situation. Now that's very, very common. It's very common. And it's even there amongst devotees to some degree. But amongst the common people, it's really common that if we associate with a sadhu, then he'll bless us for something material. And I remember, I think it was Dinabandhu Prabhu from Vrindavan was telling us, after he attended, I think that the last major Kumbh Mela, the last big Kumbh Mela, whenever that was, some years ago, he told us that there in the Kumbh Mela, you got all these sadhus. You've got so many of these people. But Dinabandhu Prabhu said, everyone is a financial advisor. Everyone is a medical advisor. Because that's what the people are going to them for. The sadhus are sitting there all day. Many hundreds of different types of sadhus with long hair, beards, and looking spiritual. But the people who are visiting that program, all they're interested in is financial advice or blessings for making money and blessings for being healthy. But we should not expect that when we associate with a sadhu. Rather, we should know that the sadhu, we can expect he'll give us instructions to cut the knot of contamination, of material attraction. Hridaya Granti, the knot in the heart. And he'll instruct us how to advance in devotional service. That's the result of associating with a sadhu. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, Kapila Muni first of all instructs that the path of liberation begins with such association. So, okay, on to verse 21. And this is a very important verse and very famous verse and very beautiful verse. Let me just read the Sanskrit. Tatikshava karunika surida sarvadehinam ajata shatrava shanta sadhava sadhu bhushana. The symptoms of a sadhu are that he is tolerant, merciful, and friendly to all living entities. He has no enemies. He's peaceful. He abides by the scriptures, and all his characteristics are sublime. So Prabhupada makes the point that a sadhu, as described above, as described above, is a devotee. And his concern is how to enlighten people and enliven people in devotional service. That's his mercy. Because he knows that without devotional service to the Lord, human life is spoiled. So therefore he travels all over, door-to-door preaching. People, be Krishna conscious, be a devotee. Don't spoil your life by just fulfilling animal propensities. Human life is meant for self-realization, meant for Krishna consciousness. So these are the preachings of a sadhu. Yes. And he's not satisfied with his own liberation. He's always thinking of how to help others. So therefore one symptom, very important symptom, is karunika, which manifests in the form of great mercy to the fallen souls. And of course, while he's preaching, he has to deal with so many opposing elements. So he has to be tolerant. And Prabhupada gives examples. Jesus was crucified. Haridas Thakur was caned in 22 marketplaces. And Lord Nityananda was violently attacked by Jagai and Madai. So, but they tolerate, the sadhus, they tolerate. And they are merciful to all the fallen souls, to all living entities, not just the humans, but also to the animals. And Prabhupada mentions in the purport here, it's the first paragraph, Shivananda Sain in Chaitanya Charitamrita, he helped one dog by treating the dog in transcendental ways. So therefore, the sadhu is merciful to the animals also. And Prabhupada says there are many cases of dogs getting salvation by associating with a sadhu. You remember the puppy dog who got the association of Lord Chaitanya? Yes. But still the world, it's such a stooly place, a rotten place. Still the world is so ungrateful that even though the sadhu is not inimical to anyone, but still the sadhu has enemies. So on to the second paragraph. So what's the difference between an enemy and a friend? Prabhupada answers the question, it's a difference in behavior. A sadhu behaves with all the conditioned souls for their relief from material entanglement. And of course, those, Prabhupada doesn't talk about it here, but an enemy always acts for your detriment. Yes. So therefore, no one could be more friendly, more of a friend than a sadhu who's delivering the conditioned souls. He's always calm, quietly, peacefully following Shastra. Yes. So sadhus, real sadhus, they always follow the principles of Scripture in their devotional service. And ultimately, one who follows Shastra must be a devotee, because Shastra says to be a devotee. Yeah. So all of these characteristics of the sadhu from verse 21, tolerant, merciful, friendly to all living entities, no enemies, peaceful, abides by the scriptures, sublime characteristics. They're all prominent characteristics of devotees. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, a devotee develops all the good qualities of the demigods, whereas a non-devotee, even though academically qualified, has no actual good qualifications or good characteristics according to the standard of transcendental realization. Right, verse 22. Such a sadhu engages in staunch devotional service. Let me begin again. Such a sadhu engages in staunch devotional service to the Lord without deviation. For the sake of the Lord, he renounces all other connections, such as family relationships and friendly acquaintances within the world. So, anyway, a sannyasi is also a sadhu, because the sadhu or the sannyasi renounces everything, his home, comfort, friends, relatives, etc., for the sake of Krishna. But the sannyasi's renunciation will be successful only when his energy is used in the service of the Lord with great austerity. So therefore it's said here in this verse, Bhaktim kurvanti ye dridham. Right. So anyway, a person who seriously engages in the service of the Lord and is in the renounced order of life is a sadhu. A sadhu is one who's given up all responsibility to society, family, worldly humanitarianism, simply for the service of the Lord. So of course, as soon as one takes birth in this world, one has many automatic responsibilities and obligations to the public, to the demigods, to the great sages, general living beings, to one's father, to one's public, to one's parents, because they look after you completely for the first so many years of your life. They do everything for you. So when a devotee, when a sadhu, sannyasi, gives up all these obligations to the public, demigods, great sages, parents, etc., etc., he's not punished. But otherwise, a materialistic person, it says, if for sense gratification a person renounces all such obligations, he is punished by the law of nature. So let's have a look here, right? Let's do verse 23 and then we'll stop. Engaged constantly in chanting and hearing about me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the sadhus do not suffer from material miseries, because they're always filled with thoughts of my pastimes and activities. Well, of course, in material life, there are many miseries, from the body and mind, from other living entities, from natural disturbances. But the sadhu is not disturbed by those things. Why? The verse says, because the sadhus are always filled with thoughts of my pastimes and activities, full of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, he doesn't talk of anything except things to do with the Lord, like the pastimes, the activities of the Lord. And, for example, Maharaj Ambarish didn't talk of anything except the pastimes of the Lord. And since the sadhus are filled with Krishna consciousness, they just forget They just forget all about the material miseries and just anything to do with material experience. But of course, the ordinary conditioned souls, forgetful of Krishna, they're always full of anxieties and material tribulations. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, on the other hand, since the devotees always engage in the topics of the Lord, they are forgetful of the miseries of material existence. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.